We're going to continue with Perek Alef Mishna Alef. So the Mishnah lists the transmission of the Torah generation to generation, and the last part is the Nevi'im Masru Anshe Knes Hagadol. The Nevi'im, they transmitted it to the Anshe Knes Hagadol. Says Rashi, Masru Zelazeh, they transmitted one to the next, meaning each one of these people listed or groups listed transmitted it from one to the next. At Shabo Anshe Knes Hagadol, until eventually it arrived by the Anshe Knes Hagadol. Then Rashi gives a partial listing of the group, who are members of the group, and then Rashi comes to address what the reason is that this group was referred to as Anshe Knesset Gdola. Well, what did they do to earn this title, and what is the meaning of this title? So Rashi says, "Mefarish b'Maseches Yuma." It's explained in Maseches Yuma, Daf Samach Tes Amud Beis, Perek Balo Kon Gadol. Shehem Hayu Knesset Gadol Kadosha. That they were a gathering, they were a congregation that was great and holy. Why? What was so great and holy about them? They restored Hashem's crown to its former glory. How'd they do that? Moshe Amar, because Moshe said, Hakel Hagadol Hagibar Vanora. Moshe said in reference to Hashem, Hashem is a God that's great, that's mighty, and that's awesome. Bo Yirmiyah, Vidaniel. Yirmiyah and Daniel came along. They stopped saying Gibar Nora in reference to Hashem. They stopped referring to Hashem with these attributes. And the Anshe Knesset Gadola, they restored things to the way they were originally, and they continued to, or they went back to using the terms Gibar and Nora in reference to Hashem. Why? Because they said, this is the might of Hashem. If not for Hashem's Gevura, if not for Hashem's might, how could one nation possibly survive amongst all the nations? If you look at the full Gemara in Yuma Daf Samach Tesma Beis, the Gemara says, Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, why were they called by this title, this term, Anshe Knesset Gadola? Because they restored the crown to its former glory. Asa Moshe Amar Hakel Gadol Gibar Vanora. Moshe came along, he said, the God that is great, that is mighty, and that is awesome. He used these attributes to describe Hashem. Also, Yirmiyah Amar. Yirmiyah came along at the time of the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, and he said, Nachrim Mekarkarim Beichal. We have these Goyim, and they're trampling in Hashem's Heichal. They're trampling in the Beis Hamikdash. Ayin also, where is Hashem's awesomeness? It doesn't seem like Hashem has this awesomeness. They're able to do whatever they want, these Goyim, in Hashem's house. So Amar Nora, he no longer used the term Nora to describe Hashem. Also Daniel came along later on as Klal Yisrael was in Galus. Amar, and he said, Nachrim Mishtabdim Bebanov. I see the Goyim, and they are subjugating Hashem's children. Where's Hashem's Gevura? Where's Hashem's might? Doesn't appear like Hashem is so mighty because he's unable to stop the Goyim from subjugating his children. So Amar Gibar, he no longer said Gibar. Asu Inu, they came along, the Anshe Knesset Gadola, V'amru, and they said Adarabba. They said just the opposite. Zuhi Gevuraso, this is Hashem's might. Shekovesh es Yitzro, that he's able to, so to say, conquer his desires and his inclinations. Shenosin erech hapayim l'risham, that he gives a delay in his anger to the wicked, and he doesn't punish the Goyim right away for subjugating his children and destroying the Beis Hamikdash. And this is Hashem's awesomeness. If not for the Mora of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not for his awesomeness. How can one nation possibly survive amongst all the other nations? And the Marshal explains that obviously Yirmiyah and Daniel were not Chas v'Shalom saying Hashem in reality does not have the midos, the attributes of Gevura and Mora. Of course, they believe Hashem did have those. They were just saying, since at this time Hashem wasn't currently utilizing those attributes, it would be inappropriate to refer to Hashem with those attributes at a time when he's not making use of them. And it seems from this Gemara something very interesting. Here you have Yirmiyah, you have Daniel, and they're saying, look, we see the Goyim are running through the Beis Hamikdash. They're totally destroying the place. They're laying waste to it. Nobody's doing anything. Nothing's happening. Hashem almost, Chas v'Shalom, seems powerless to intervene. And you have these Goyim, and they're subjugating Klal Yisrael, taking them, murdering them, taking them as prisoners, and making all kinds of decrees against them, and harming them in all kinds of ways. And once again, Chas v'Shalom, it seems as if Hashem is powerless to intervene. So I said it doesn't seem that Hashem is utilizing his midos of Gevura and Morah. Yet, came along the Anshe Knesset Hagadol, and they said, really, it's just the opposite. If you look at the situation, the fact that Hashem has not wiped out the Goyim the moment they started up with Klal Yisrael can only be because Hashem is utilizing his Gevura. That is a display of Hashem's Gevura, because if not for that, Hashem's desire naturally, so to say, would be to wipe him out immediately. That would be Hashem's knee-jerk reaction. And the fact that Hashem is not doing that is only because he's restraining himself using his special Gevura. So that is his Gevura. And how could Klal Yisrael still be surviving amongst all these nations, this one lonely, solitary nation? That's an example and an expression of Hashem's Mora. So on the contrary, Hashem is utilizing these midos, and therefore it's appropriate to, once again, refer to Hashem using these titles and these attributes. But we see from here something very interesting, that you can have something which on the surface appears exactly like a certain way, and even if you look at it deeper, it really does look like it is that way. And the reality could be that it's not only is it not that way, but it's exactly the opposite. Just at the moment where it appears Hashem is not utilizing his Gevura and is not utilizing his Mora, the reality could be that Hashem is. And just at that moment where it seems so clear that Hashem is, so to say, not the Gibar, on the contrary, Hashem could be showcasing and expressing and projecting his Gevura. And if that's the case, sometimes in life we see things, be it, on a global level, on a personal level, whatever it may be, a communal level, whatever it may be, and it seems so clear that it's a certain way, and it sometimes may be even difficult to understand why, what, where, how. And we see from here that just because it looks that way, not only does it not have to be that way, it could be that it's exactly the opposite. What looks like maybe so terrible, on the contrary, it could really be the best. And what looks like a lack of Hashem's Gevura might really be the greatest display of Hashem's Gevura. And if we keep that in mind, it could be something which could be mechazik us, even at times where things maybe seem difficult to understand. When we look further into the Gemara, though, it seems also difficult to understand, because the Gemara says that if not for Hashem's Mora, and Rashis seems to call it Hashem's Gevura, how could one nation possibly survive amongst all these other nations? And therefore that requires either Hashem's awesomeness or Hashem's special might to keep Klal Yisrael surviving amongst all these nations. But why does it require anything special from Hashem? Maybe the reason we're still around is just simply because we have allies, we have friends in high places that protect us. Or even without that, right? There's many nations that are, so to say, solitary nations. They're the Chinese, the British, the French, or back then the Babylonians, the Greeks, whoever was around, the Persians, right? Each one of them was also a solitary nation amongst all the nations, and they're not being destroyed. Does that also require Hashem's special gevur? Maybe no one's just trying to destroy them. And we see from here that it seems that, so to say, the default, if you will, the alpiderech hateva, the natural course of events is that Klal Yisrael should be destroyed when we're amongst the nations. The nations want to destroy us. They're trying to destroy us. Similar to what we say perhaps by the Haggadah on Pesach, we say, B'chol dar v'dar omdem aleinu l'chaloseinu. In every generation they stand up to destroy us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzileinu miyadam, and Hashem saves us from their hand. In every generation they're looking to destroy us, and naturally they would destroy us. And the only possible way that we're still here is only because Hashem has these midos of gevura and moral, which, so to say, enables Hashem to be able to turn back the tide and to stand up to what should be the natural course of events and be able to change it and stop that from happening. And if that's the case, then of course, while it's true, we have an obligation to do ishtadlus, and maybe we do diplomatic channels, maybe sometimes military, whatever they may be, to ensure Klal Yisrael's protection. But we have to realize that it's just ishtadlus. But ultimately, the real address we have to turn to is Hashem, and it's only because Hashem is ensuring through His gevura or His morah that we still exist, that we're still able to exist. And if we want to be able to continue to have the schus to merit that, so we have to make sure, be it increasing our kiyum mitzvos, our limat Torah, our tefillah, whatever it may be, and of course ultimately our bitachon, our reliance and trust in Hashem, and Bez Hashem, through that we could continue to ensure that we're zocha to that continued protection from Hashem's utilization of His gevura and His morah. But one last thing which I think we see from this Gemara, which is very interesting, is that it seems, the Gemara says, that if you want to see Hashem's Gevura, just take a look. Here you have these Goyim, they're subjugating Hashem's children, and he's being Marachaf. He's delaying his anger, and he's not destroying them. And that requires Hashem has to be kovish his yetzer. He has to conquer his natural desire. He wants to destroy them, and he's holding himself back. It requires, it's like, you got to restrain yourself. It requires Hashem's Gevura. And why is that? First of all, we know Hashem is Erech Apayim in general. It's one of the Yud Midos of Hashem. One of his 13 attributes is Hashem delays his anger. He doesn't punish right away. He gives a person a chance to tshuva. And Hashem is Racham, Machanun. Hashem also is Chesed, right? So maybe the reason why Hashem is not destroying them right away is Hashem's having mercy on them. Hashem is doing Chesed with them. Hashem's giving them a chance to do tshuva. And more so, if we think about it, why is it that the Goyim are subjugating us? Why are we subject to that? The reason is because, as it started from the when they destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, Klal Yisrael had sunk to such a level, we were not living up to that which we needed to do, and we became deserving that if we didn't have the Beis HaMikdash be destroyed, as the Gemara said, then we would have had to be destroyed. So we had sunk to such a level that we would be destroyed if not for the fact that Hashem took out, so to say, his wrath on the Beis HaMikdash. And we're being sent into the exile and subjugated by the Goyim because of the levels we had sunk to and how distant we had become from Hashem. So at such a time, is it so crazy that Hashem is not destroying the Goyim for harming Klal Yisrael when they're at such a level and they're so distant from Hashem? And we see from here that the answer is yes, it could only be because of Hashem's special might that Hashem is able to restrain himself from destroying the Goyim, because look what they're doing. They're attacking Klal Yisrael. What do you mean Klal Yisrael has sunk to such levels and they're so distant from Hashem? The answer is, but to Hashem, it doesn't matter what Klal Yisrael does. Hashem's love for Klal Yisrael has nothing to do with what we do. Hashem loves us, is not dependent on anything. And Hashem's love for us runs so deep that if anyone at any time, no matter who Klal Yisrael is and what they've done and where they are, if anyone should do anything to harm Klal Yisrael, Hashem's, so to say, knee-jerk reaction is, I'll destroy them. How could you start up with my beloved children? And the only way Hashem cannot destroy them is Hashem has to literally restrain himself. He has to take his gevurah, his might, and, hold himself back. And if not for that, he would just destroy the Goyim right away. And if we could appreciate this, how deep and how far Hashem's love for Klal Yisrael runs and how it's not dependent on anything, then Be'ezer Hashem Kemayim Panim Apanim, we can begin to feel that love back toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu and deepen our own feelings towards Hashem and strengthen our relationship with Hashem. And Be'ezer Hashem, through that, be able to strengthen our own Kiyum HaMitzvos, and through that be zocha to all the good that Hashem is always looking to shower upon us.